You're listening to Himalayan Adventure by Vaile. Chapter 19.
About an hour later, Zaw and his sister began to slink through the darkness towards the twinkling yellow lights of Shabrubesi. It wouldn't take them very long to reach the hotel that Pemba was staying at, and they had agreed with Pemba to wait the hour to make sure that Burnmaster and his companions were fast asleep. There was barely a sliver of moon in the sky, making the night comfortably dark for the yetis, who were as keen as ever to avoid detection. Neither of them expected to encounter any humans during the quick hike across the barren mountainside, but once they were into the town, there was always the possibility that one or two night owls might be moving around on the main street. That was why Zaw and Abby were wearing their usual disguises when traveling outside of the mountains: blue jeans and thick jackets with the hoods pulled over their faces to hide their furry features. Zaw's jacket was fireball red, fashionable but not the perfect color for being sneaky. Both he and his sister were walking barefoot, carrying their shoes slung around their necks with the laces tied together. Their feet, complete with razor-sharp claws several inches long, were far better suited to traversing the mountainside than the shoes whose only real purpose was to hide their hairy feet when the yetis were moving around in Kathmandu. When they reached the outskirts of the town, they crouched down behind some shrubs and waited for a few minutes, watching carefully. The main street was mostly dark, but there were a few patches illuminated by soft pools of yellow light that spilled from a handful of windows with open curtains. The street seemed deserted, but clearly not everybody in the town was fast asleep. That wasn't a problem, as Zaw and Abby were very good at creeping around, but their plan was entirely dependent on Burnmaster and the others getting some shut-eye in preparation for the start of their big trek tomorrow morning. If they were wide awake and playing cards till the sun came up, the yetis' plan to steal their gear would sum to naught, and Zaw might have to do his best imitation of a Langtang Park ranger after all. The rambunctious yeti pushed the thought from his mind and resolved to cross that crevasse when he came to it. Satisfied that there were no curious eyes watching from the windows of nearby buildings, the yetis rose from behind the shrubs, sprinted across a dozen meters of rocky ground, and then disappeared into the shadows of Shabrubesi. Zaw wasn't entirely certain where Pemba's hotel was, but it wasn't too difficult to find anything in a small town like this one. He knew the name of the place, and it wasn't long before his sharp eyes picked out the hotel's unlit sign. Gesturing to his sister, they slipped from shadow to shadow until they were standing with their backs to the wall of the hotel in which Burnmaster and the others were staying. Neither of them had raised a sweat, but they both knew that this was where the real work began. Zaw cast his gaze along the windows on the second level, which was where, according to Pemba, Burnmaster and the others were staying. All of the lights were off, and there were no indications of any movement inside the rooms. A good sign. With a bit of luck, everybody was fast asleep. Zaw wasn't a religious creature. The yeti had no religion of their own and had never felt the need to buy into one of the human ones, but if he was, he would have uttered a quick prayer. He shifted his attention to the job of getting up to the windows. The hotel was 2 stories high with a timber exterior. There were no handholds to assist him in climbing up to the second story, a problem that would probably have thwarted the efforts of a human climber. But Zaw was so much more than that. Rolling back the red sleeves of his jacket and extending the claws of his left hand, he briefly pressed them into the wood to make sure he would have enough grip to climb the wall. The razor-sharp tips sank easily into the timber surface. "Lucky it's made from wood," Abby remarked. "If it was stone, you might not be able to climb it." "Are you kidding?" Zaw chuckled. "If I couldn't climb it, I would just jump up." That might have been a bit too noisy, though. His sister looked up at the dark windows. "Which one's Pemba's?" she asked. "Not sure," Zaw replied. "He told me, but I can't remember." "Great," she muttered. "That really fills me with confidence about this plan." Zaw unlooped the shoelaces from over his neck and quietly placed the shoes on the ground. "You worry too much," he said. "You don't worry enough," she retorted. "How do you know they're asleep?" "Because none of the lights are on," he explained. "You never lay in bed in the middle of the night, awake but with the lights off?" she asked. "Sure," he replied, "but not when I just escaped from a killer landslide. That was last night, and I reckon they've probably caught up on all the sleep they missed as a result of that," she said. Zaw shrugged. "Maybe," he said, "or maybe not. Only one way to find out. Just remember one thing," she declared. "If you get caught, I'm not going to come and rescue you." Zaw extended all of his finger and toe claws, dug them into the wall, and started climbing. "How many times do I have to tell you?" he hissed. "We're not going to get caught." It only took him a few moments to scale the wall up to the first window. Leaning closer to the glass, he saw through the half-open curtains a dark-haired islander boy asleep in the bed. It was difficult to tell if the boy was sound asleep or just dozing fitfully, but Zaw decided it didn't matter. He would be in and out of the room in a few moments. Hesitation and not action was the greatest danger in this situation, if only he could get his sister to understand that. Lifting one hand from the wall, he gently tried to open the window, but it was solidly locked. Far from unbreakable, but any noise much louder than a fluttering bird might wake the islander boy. Then, using the claw of his index finger, he slowly carved a small circle the size of his palm in the glass just above the latch that he could see inside the window. This was the first time he had cut glass using one of his claws, and he half expected it to sound like human fingernails being scraped down a blackboard. In fact, he discovered that with a bit of care he could cut a deep groove almost noiselessly into the surface of the glass, and 30 seconds later the small circle was complete. After giving it a tap to check that it was loose enough, he deftly flicked it onto the rug on the floor inside the room. The islander boy didn't move. Zaw smiled. This was going to be easier than he thought. Extending his finger through the newly cut hole, he unlatched the window, carefully raised it all the way up, and then slipped inside the darkened room. The door to the room was closed, which suited Zaw just fine. That way there was no chance somebody walking along the hallway could glance into the hotel room and see him helping himself to the islander boy's belongings. Thieves were about as popular in Nepal as anywhere else in the world, and there was always a risk that law-abiding citizens would take it upon themselves to teach the thief a lesson. Zaw had no qualms about what he was doing because he knew it was for the boy's benefit, but he didn't want to have to explain that to a complete stranger. Any more than he wanted to explain why he had a furry face and claws and wasn't human. He paused to look around. The hotel room was plain and functional: a bed, a closet, a desk and a chair, and a few old paintings on the walls. The islander boy's rucksack was leaning against the chair, and there were several items of clothing on the desktop. Zaw didn't intend to waste any time repacking the rucksack. It wasn't necessary for him to steal all of the boy's belongings. Provided the lion's share of the equipment was in the rucksack, that would be good enough to halt the islander boy's expedition into the mountains. He picked up the rucksack and tiptoed back across the room to the open window. The cold breath of the mountain night was drifting inside and disturbing the comfortable warmth of the room. Peering outside, he saw his sister's anxious face staring up, and he grinned. After showing her the rucksack, he tossed it out the window and into her waiting hands below. By the time she had hidden the rucksack behind a nearby shrub, he had slipped out of the room and closed the window. Later, the islander boy would find the hole in the window and the matching circle of glass on the rug, but there was no way he would ever suspect that he had been burgled by a yeti. Zaw swiftly climbed across the wall to the next window and peered inside the room. The occupant, another islander boy, was fast asleep. This is too easy, Zaw thought to himself as he quickly cut a circle in the window pane, unlatched the locked window, and swung himself inside. He crossed the room silently and picked up the rucksack resting against the closet. On his way back to the window, he glanced at the boy again and wondered if he looked familiar. He had seen that face before, but he couldn't quite place it. He paused, thinking for a moment, and then realized he had seen the boy's picture in the news a few months ago, something about Japan, and a priceless sword that was almost stolen, except that the boy and his friends had helped to catch the thieves. That's right, this boy was the prince of some island in the Pacific Ocean, and now something of a hero in Japan. Well, stopping some human thieves is one thing, but stopping a yeti is another thing entirely, thought Zaw. Don't feel bad, kid, you've just been burgled by the best. He dropped the rucksack out of the open window, and Abby hid it behind the shrub with the other one. After sliding the window closed, he climbed across the wall and hit the next two rooms with the same ease and efficiency as the first two. Zaw wasn't a criminal by nature, but yeti were perfectly suited for being sneaky. When he was in Isabelle's room, he paused to stare at her as she slept. He had never had the opportunity to talk to a human teenager from the other side of the world, and he was immensely curious about this blonde-haired girl. There were quite a few teenagers living in Shangri-La, so he had many human friends about his own age, but they all came from Nepal or Tibet. None of the foreign climbers who lived in Shangri-La, after being rescued from near-fatal climbing accidents by the yeti, had ever brought any children with them to Shangri-La. So the only thing he knew about teenagers who came from America or England, he learned by watching movies downloaded from the internet. As far as he was concerned, it was grossly unfair that Pemba could spend all of his time with Burnmaster and the others while he had to sneak around at night and sleep outside with the creepy crawlies. It was just one more reason why Zaw harbored a gnawing jealousy about the privileges of being human. With these glum thoughts in mind, he clambered across to the next window and peered into the room. Pemba was lying in bed and his eyes were closed. Zaw didn't believe that his friend was really asleep, but as Pemba hadn't noticed Zaw's shadow slide in front of the window, he wrapped his claws softly on the glass and watched for a response. Pemba opened his eyes immediately, threw off the blankets, and hurried over to the window. Zaw motioned for his friend to unlatch it and slide it up. Pemba rolled his eyes and indicated that the yeti should cut a circle in the glass like he was doing for all of the other windows. "Just open the window for me, nitwit," Zaw thought. "We haven't got time for this." Shaking his head, he vehemently gestured for Pemba to unlatch the window and raise it. Pemba responded by motioning again that Zaw should cut a circle in the glass. They continued like this for another 30 seconds or so, until Pemba threw his hands up in the air in disgust and opened the window. "What are you trying to do?" Zaw hissed angrily, eyeballing his friend. "Trying to make this harder than it already is." "I was trying to get you to cut a circle in the glass," whispered Pemba. "Yeah, I got that message," Zaw said. "But you seem to have forgotten that I don't have to sneak into your room to steal your bag because we are on the same team, you moron." Pemba rolled his eyes. "I know we're on the same team," he retorted. "But if you cut holes in all the windows except mine, don't you think it will look a bit suspicious?" Zaw hadn't thought of that. "All right, when you close it, I'll cut a hole in it too," he agreed. "Hurry up and get your bag." "Or are you gonna make me climb in and get it as well?" Pemba retrieved his bag and thrust it into the yeti's hand. "How many rooms have you got left?" he asked. "4, Zaw said. "Burnmaster and the 3 Koreans." "Good, okay, be careful," Pemba said. "Give me a call on the sat phone when you're done." Pemba stuck his head out the window and gave Abby a quick wave, then slid it closed and watched as Zaw sliced a perfect circle in the glass and flicked it inside. "Those claws sure do come in handy sometimes," Pemba thought. Being a yeti could actually be really cool, apart from being covered in so much fur. Chuckling to himself, he hopped back under the covers and put the sat phone under his pillow in readiness for Zaw's call. Zaw had no problem swiping Burnmaster's rucksack from underneath the sleeping man's nose, but when he came to Main's room, he found the desk lamp shining brightly. For a moment he was worried that the Korean was awake and reading, but after peeking through the window, he saw that the huge man was sound asleep in bed, his long silver hair flowing over the edge of the pillow. The Korean was snoring so loudly that Zaw could have just smashed the window to gain entry, but he cut a hole anyway. Moments later, he was inside and helping himself to the big man's black rucksack. The next room was Mohawk's, which was completely dark except for the giant's shiny silver grill of hair that shone like a fluorescent light. Zaw had never seen anything like it and almost tripped on the edge of the rug as he crept back across the room. As this man was snoring loudly too, it wouldn't have mattered if he'd gone sprawling across the floor. After tossing the pack down to Abby, he quickly slid the window shut, leaving Mohawk sleeping soundly. As Zaw climbed across the wall towards the final window, in his mind this little mission was already in the bag, so to speak. In only a few short minutes, he had grabbed all of his target's rucksacks, which were now in Abby's safekeeping, ready to be spirited away and donated to some worthy recipients. There was no doubt the loss of all their gear would put an end to Burnmaster's plans to go traipsing around the mountains looking for yeti, and Zaw was hopeful that after this setback, the team would become disillusioned and return to wherever they came from. When that happened, it would be game over for Burnmaster's yeti hunting days. That's right, thought Zaw. Yeti, 1, humans, 0. Just like taking candy from a baby, it shouldn't be this easy. The first thing he noticed when he stopped outside the last window was that the huge man sleeping on the bed inside the room was not covered by any blankets. All of the other humans had been well tucked in against the cold, but this one seemed impervious to the chill of the night. As Zaw sliced a circle of glass out of the window, he studied the sleeping giant curiously, noting the slightly odd body proportions and thick silver fur on the enormous arms. The only place Zaw had seen fur-like that was when he looked in the mirror. None of the humans back in Shangri-La were sporting that kind of body hair. Either this guy had been overdosing on steroids or he was part monkey. Quietly opening the window, he slipped inside, taking care not to step on the small circle of glass lying on the rug. The rucksack was leaning against the bed, right next to the sleeping giant's head. Moving slowly, very slowly, Zaw bent over and lifted the pack off the ground, taking the opportunity as he did so to get a closer look at the man's face. Zaw was no expert on the human species, but this guy just didn't seem to fit the mold. Everything was symmetrical, but the features were a little strange. Aside from the fact that the head was huge and rather cone-shaped, the nose was particularly flat and the jaw was massive and looked like it was made of granite. It was a face that only a mother could love, and anthropologically speaking, it perfectly fitted the description of the missing link. Scientists from all corners of the globe were scratching around in ancient caves, vainly searching for any evidence of the existence of the missing link, but here he was, sound asleep in a hotel room in Nepal. It was then that the teenage yeti realized that the room was very quiet, too quiet. For a moment he wondered why, then remembered that the other Koreans had been snoring loudly in their sleep. That was what the difference was. Nothing to worry about. Standing up, he was about to turn away when he noticed a gleam from beneath an eyelid. And then the black eye opened. Zaw froze. The eye blinked lazily but remained open and staring. Zaw was so close and his eyesight so sharp that he could see his own tiny reflection in the mirror-like surface of the black eyeball. He looked like a child's toy, a little white tiger wearing a red jacket and a pair of jeans. Nothing happened. The room remained completely silent, but to Zaw's adrenaline-fueled senses, the gentle breeze outside the window sounded like a thundering waterfall. He stayed dead still, holding his breath. Completely focused on the silver-haired giant on the bed, still nothing happened. Zaw blinked, once, twice, and waited, then his shoulders relaxed. After a few long moments, he decided the giant Korean was somehow asleep with one eye open. He had heard stories about humans who slept with their eyes open, sound asleep, but staring at the ceiling. A harmless medical condition, except it probably ruined a good night's sleep. Zaw's yeti heart was beating hard, but he wouldn't tell his sister that when he climbed down to her. Taking a firmer grip on the rucksack, he stood up slowly and his mouth twisted into a small smile. Close call, he thought to himself. If this big fella woke up in a sour mood, I'd be in a whole lot of. Suddenly, Flat Top exploded forward with a roar, like an alligator charging from beneath the placid surface of a lake. His black eyes, both open now, blazed murderously as he swept one arm towards the intruder. Zaw was less than a meter away and had only a fraction of a second to react. A human teenager would have been too slow, but Zaw's yeti reflexes were twice as fast. Dropping the rucksack, he leapt straight back with a yelp like a surprised puppy. Flat Top's hand whipped past Zaw's legs, missing him by inches. Zaw came down, one clawed foot landing on the end of the mattress and tearing 3 long parallel gashes in the fabric as he tried to leap off the bed. But then one toe hooked on the mattress springs and he tumbled forward onto the timber floor. Flat Top jumped off the bed and, sailing through the air, bore down on Zaw with the intention of driving his knee into his head. Zaw scrambled aside, and a second later the giant GX hit the floor with a terrific crunch, smashing a basketball-sized hole in the timber. When he lifted his knee to inspect the crushed body of his prey, he saw that he had missed and he bared his teeth like a chimpanzee. Up to this moment, Zaw's movements had been controlled by pure reaction rather than reasoned thought. But his surprise was rapidly wearing off and being replaced by real mind-numbing fear. The silver-haired giant was huge, angry, and there was something about the way he moved and how fast he moved that was setting off alarm bells in Zaw's mind. He considered himself to be the equal of any human in a fight, but this guy was faster than any human Zaw had ever met. Normally humans moved like their limbs were filled with sand and Zaw could easily swat them away, but this guy bounced around like a monkey on fast forward. No doubt there was an explanation for that, but now wasn't the time to ponder why. Zaw scrambled to his feet and, grabbing hold of the freestanding cupboard, pulled it down between himself and the Korean. It crashed to the floor, forcing Flat Top to jump out of the way. Roaring with rage, he picked it up and threw it aside. Zaw, sensing that this might be his only opportunity to escape, leapt straight for the open window. He managed to get both of his legs out and was about to disappear into the night when Flat Top wrapped one huge hand around Zaw's arm and flung him back across the room. The yeti hit the wall hard and collapsed to the floor in a jumble of limbs. His vision blurred for a moment and his shoulder felt like it had been wrenched from the socket. This was real pain, and it helped to hammer home the fact that he was no match for this human. The idea that a member of the fairer species was able to best him in a fight was a bit hard on the ego, but he would deal with that later. Right now, he needed to focus on surviving the next few minutes. Flat Top hulked forward, roaring and beating his huge fists against his barrel chest like a silverback gorilla demonstrating his dominance to a challenger. Zaw, stunned from the fall, managed to get to his feet just in time to see Flat Top charge across the room, head first, intent on smashing into Zaw like a battering ram. The teenage yeti leapt straight up, stabbed his finger and toe claws into the timber wall and stuck there. Flat Top's head smashed into the wall beneath Zaw's legs, splintering timber and momentarily trapping his head. Seeing his opportunity, Zaw somersaulted over the huge Korean, landed on the mattress and springboarded towards the open window. Flattop pulled his head from the wall and saw his opponent make a dash for safety. Seizing the desk by its legs, he hurled it across the room, striking Zaw on the side of the head and knocking him to the floor. Bloodied, Flattop advanced on his opponent, flexing his huge hands in anticipation of the kill. "Take that hood off so I can see your face," growled Flattop. "I want to see the look in your eyes when I finish you." Shaking his head groggily, Zaw raised himself up to his knees and pulled the red hood further down over his face. Despite the danger, he would protect his identity and his secret for as long as he lived. "Trust me, you don't want to see me," he sneered. "I'm even uglier than you are." "You're gonna regret saying that because I'm even meaner than I am ugly," Flattop snapped back. "You know what we do to thieves where I come from. I don't suppose it's a slap on the wrist and a stern warning," Zaw suggested optimistically. "I'm pretty sure that's how it's done in Nepal." Flattop had positioned himself between Zaw and the open window, so there was no chance that he could escape. The GX shook his bull head. "Nope," he declared, "straight to death row for all of them, and then the firing squad." "Except for the ones that get selected for the weird medical experiments," replied Zaw. "That's what happened to you, right?" Flattop bared his teeth and pounded one fist into the palm of his hand. "Keep the wisecracks coming, runt," he hissed, "and you'll be laughing through a mouthful of broken teeth in a few moments." Just then, a female voice spoke from behind. "Let's not get started on teeth. That's what got us into this mess in the first place." "What the?" Flattop blurted out. He turned around but was too slow. Abby, having sneaked through the open window a moment ago, grabbed him by one of his huge arms and judo-flipped him. His howl of surprise was cut short by the crunch as he crashed through the door and went sprawling into the corridor. Abby helped her brother to his feet. "I don't recall your brilliant plan involving me rescuing you from a rampaging human," she joked. "How was I supposed to know they come that big and strong?" Zaw said ruefully. "He did pull a bus out from under a landslide, remember?" she replied. "There wouldn't have been any problems if he'd been asleep like he was meant to be," Zaw muttered. Abby heard doors opening and suddenly several people appeared in the corridor. "I think we've woken up the whole hotel. Let's get out of here," she whispered. Zaw and Abby swung out of the open window one after the other. They landed like cats on the ground 4 meters below. Abby hurried over to the place she had hidden the rucksacks, but before she could pick them up, she heard the silver-haired giant bellowing inside the room. "Leave them, we haven't got time," hissed Zaw. "But then this whole thing will have been a waste," Abby protested. "He'll be down here any second now," Zaw said. "Come on." Bloodied and dazed, Flattop rose to his feet, charged across the room, and thrust his head out the window in time to see the 2 thieves disappear into the darkness. Isabelle and her irritating friends were behind him asking questions, but he ignored them. Staring after his quarry, he bellowed into the starry night, then squeezed his huge body out of the window and jumped down to the ground, landing with a heavy thud. He gave chase but returned a few minutes later, empty-handed. The 2 thieves had managed to evaporate into thin air without leaving any tracks. They were quick and stealthy, and he wondered if they could be part of another military operation. The one he had fought had been fast and tough and handled himself like a soldier. It would be strange for his masters to send 2 teams to Nepal to find the yeti tooth, but not impossible. Flattop's face twisted into an angry scowl. The idea that his masters didn't trust him enough to do the job rankled. Taking some deep breaths to control his animal rage, he suddenly noticed the pile of rucksacks behind the bushes and went over to investigate. Maine tried to switch on the light in Flattop's room, but at some point during the tussle with the thief it had been broken. Flick, 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 nothing. There was no way he was going into the room in the dark. Luckily, he had a small torch handy. He switched it on, casting a narrow beam of yellow light around the gloomy interior. The room had been destroyed. The cupboard lay shattered, several paintings were broken, and there was a large hole in the wall. The door had been blasted off its metal hinges and was lying on the corridor floor. Isabelle, wearing socks and pajamas, darted past Maine, then gingerly picked her way around the broken cupboard and hurried over to the open window. Laheeti and Twig, similarly dressed, followed her. The brilliant stars in the Himalayan night sky did little to light the area outside the window, but after a minute she saw Flattop's hulking form materialize from the darkness, walking towards the hotel. Even from the window, Isabelle heard the unmistakable sound of him sniffing at the air, searching for a scent like a bloodhound. Then he dropped down onto all 4s and sniffed at the ground, moving from place to place like the gorillas that Isabelle had seen at the zoo on the Vavu Islands. "What is he doing?" she whispered. "I have no idea," replied Laheeti, shaking his head. The 14-year-olds watched him stop behind a shrub, pick something up and then stand up on two legs to examine it more closely. Isabelle stared at the object but couldn't see it clearly. "That's not a body, is it?" she asked. Twig squinted in the darkness and said, "It can't be, it hasn't got any arms or legs." "Or a head," added Laheeti. "It could be just a torso," Twig agreed. Isabelle made a face. "You guys, that's gross." Flattop stepped closer to the window and Mane shone the torchlight down. The silver fur on Flattop's arms gleamed in the night. "Look what I found," he said, holding up two rucksacks for his audience to see. "Hey, that red one's mine," exclaimed Isabelle. "But how did it?" It took a moment for the penny to drop. "You mean the thief broke into my room while I was sleeping and stole my pack?" she exclaimed. "Not just your room, by the looks of things," said Burnmaster, standing behind her. Flattop had collected several more packs and piled them on the ground outside the window. "Good thing Flattop woke up and spoiled the thief's night," he said. Pemba hurried downstairs to the foyer and let Flattop into the hotel. The giant GX carried all of the rucksacks upstairs and dropped them on the floor. A quick check confirmed that the packs were unopened and none of the equipment had been stolen. Seeing that his rucksack was fine, Twigger went back to examining the circle of glass he had found lying on a small rug near the window. Holding it near Mane's torchlight, he saw that it was roughly the size of his palm and clearly not part of the broken light bulb. He slid the window closed and immediately saw the hole that had been cut into the window pane, right next to the latch. The piece of glass was a perfect match. "This is how the thief got in," he said, and quickly explained his idea. Burnmaster agreed, "But I'm not sure how he managed to climb up to the window in the first place," he mused. "There are no handholds on the wall at all." "Maybe he had a ladder," suggested Isabelle. "Then where is it?" asked Burnmaster. "Maybe he ran away with it," Isabelle replied. Burnmaster shrugged. "Maybe, but seeing as he left the rucksacks behind, I find it hard to believe he would run away carrying a ladder," he said. Pemba moved around the room slowly, looking for signs that Zaw had been hurt during the fight with Flattop. The room was in disarray, and it was easy to imagine that his Yeti friend had all manner of injuries and broken limbs. Everything made from wood had been smashed. If Flattop was capable of causing this much damage, what had he done to Zaw? Pemba knew his Yeti friend was tough, but had Zaw ever faced an opponent who was capable of smashing a hole through a wall? As he looked around, he felt a ball of anxiety settle into the pit of his stomach. He badly wanted to call Zaw on the sat phone to find out if he was okay, but as everybody was awake and moving around, now was not the time. "So Flattop," Pemba said, smiling broadly to hide his concern, "did you teach that thief a lesson he'll never forget?" "I think he got the shock of his life, if that's what you mean," the giant GX muttered. "But did you bust him up?" Pemba pressed. "Bust him up," repeated Flattop. "Yeah, break some bones," Pemba said. Flattop shrugged. "Might have," he grunted. "But it can't have been his leg bones because he scurried away like a rat up a drain pipe." "Serves him right for trying to steal our gear," replied Pemba, with what he hoped was believable enthusiasm. "We should report this to the police," Isabelle said. Pemba frowned. The last thing he needed was for the police to start asking questions and poking around. It was always possible they might find a strand of Yeti hair and send it to a laboratory for forensic testing. "There's probably no point," he declared. "The thief is long gone and he didn't manage to steal anything anyway." "No point," exclaimed Isabelle. "He broke into our rooms while we were asleep. He could have murdered us." "Doesn't that bother you?" "Of course it bothers me," Pemba said, thinking that the chance of Zaw murdering somebody was less than 0%. "I'm shocked and horrified that this has happened." "You don't sound shocked," Isabelle said. "Maybe this is normal for Nepal, but in England this sort of thing freaks people out." "Trust me, I'm shocked," said Pemba. "It's just that the police in this part of the world aren't very, effective. We should just be thankful that nothing was stolen and nobody was hurt." "Flattop was hurt," she retorted. "Look, his head is bleeding, doesn't he count?" "Of course he counts," Pemba said quickly. "What I meant was nobody was hurt badly. We're all still in one piece and that's the most important thing. If we get the police involved, they'll just waste our time asking a lot of questions and then nothing will get done about it. We don't need that hassle, right?" Isabelle took a pen and paper out of her rucksack. "I still say we should report it to the police," she said, "even if they aren't very effective." Mohawk was stitching up the cut in his brother's head with practice strokes. Isabelle tried not to look at the small steel needle as it went in and out of the skin. "So what did the thief look like?" she asked. The only reason Flattop bothered to answer the blonde-haired brat's questions was because he couldn't leave while Mohawk was patching him up. About 175 centimeters tall, wearing a red jacket and blue jeans, he explained. Isabelle scribbled that down. What about his face, she asked. I didn't get a look at his face, Flattop said. Why not, she asked. Because it was dark and his jacket had a hood covering his face, explained Flattop. But surely the hood didn't cover all of his face, she pressed. You must have seen his chin, so what did it look like? Flattop glanced at her angrily. I didn't see his chin or anything else, he muttered. Isabelle briefly wondered if the big Korean was hiding something. But you could tell it was a man, so you must have seen something, right? She continued. Like a beard or something. Flattop shook his head. He spoke to me, that's how I know he was a man, he said. He sounded young, like a teenager, so did the other one. Isabelle's pen stopped writing mid-stroke. The other one. You mean there were two thieves? She asked. Right, Flattop said. And was the other one a man too? She asked. Flattop looked sheepish. No, he answered. Isabelle waited for him to say something more, but he was silent. So the other one was a woman then? She prompted. I think so, he said. Mohawk and Mane exchanged a glance and smirked. Which thief flipped you? Asked Mohawk. Flattop coughed and spoke at the same time, with the result that his answer was inaudible. Mohawk stopped stitching. I'm sorry, what did you say? He asked, amused. I said it was the girl, growled Flattop. Are you happy now? Keep stitching. The two GXs started laughing, wild, deep-throated guffaws that seemed to echo straight from the green jungles of Africa. You got judo flipped by a girl, Mane managed to gasp between gales of laughter. So what? Howled Flattop. At least I saved our gear. All you two did was sleep. We're getting off track, Isabelle said. Did you get a look at the woman? This was clearly a topic that Flattop didn't want to discuss. No, he said. Then he turned and shot a baleful look at his brothers, daring them to laugh again. She judo flipped me before I got a look at her. Pemba clapped his hands together more loudly than he intended. Well, that settles it, he remarked. We can't go to the police with only that information. Two teenage thieves, one wearing a red jacket and blue jeans. That description matches about 1 million people in Nepal, so we may as well just thank our lucky stars that. Flattop interrupted, a thoughtful frown denting his features. But there was one thing though, he said. What's that? Asked Isabelle. When the thief was on the ground, the man thief I saw his bare feet, he explained. He tried to hide them, but I saw them. Pemba didn't like where this was going. So what we know from this, Flattop, is that you've got a foot fetish, he said quickly. Nothing to be ashamed about, it's perfectly normal. I'm sure there are people back in Korea, health professionals who will be able to help you overcome this weird and unhealthy desire to look at other people's feet. Isabelle ignored the Nepalese teenager. Was there something strange about his bare feet? She queried. Yeah, Flattop replied absently, his eyes staring past her at the memory in his mind. They were furry, not just hairy, really furry. Like animal fur, and I think I saw long claws on the toes. Sounds rather like a monkey foot, said Burnmaster, who was leaning against the open doorway and listening quietly. Pemba looked from face to face. All right, this is sounding really ridiculous, he laughed. You're saying we were robbed by monkeys, is that what you're saying? Because if you are, that's crazy. The craziest thing I've ever heard. When I met up with you guys, I had no idea I was getting on the loony bus to Shabrubesi. Ease up, Pemba, he's just saying what he saw, that's all, said Burnmaster. Nobody's suggesting anything. Well, I think the thief was probably wearing furry white socks, Pemba declared. That would explain how he could enter and leave our rooms so quietly. Flattop probably just saw the white socks and mistook them for furry white feet. Flattop fixed his small black eyes on Pemba. Who said anything about the fur being white? He said carefully. If Pemba was a nervous person, he would have started to sweat. In his haste to criticize Flattop's monkey story, he had accidentally described Zaw's feet. You didn't say white, he stammered nervously. I thought you said white. In my imagination when you said fur, I imagined white fur, but of course it wasn't white fur at all, probably just white furry socks. And what about the claws? Asked Isabelle. How do you explain them? Long toenails, Pemba replied quickly. They could look like claws in the dark. I personally cut mine regularly, but some people let them grow. Isabelle wrinkled up her nose. So you're saying the toenails were sticking through the ends of the socks? She asked. Pemba shrugged. The easiest explanation is usually the correct one, he replied. Makes more sense than being robbed by monkeys. Burnmaster eased himself away from the doorway. All right, you guys, I think we've heard enough, he said. How about we let Mohawk finish stitching up Flattop's head, and we all head back to our rooms and get some sleep. Isabelle, Laheeti and Twig departed down the corridor, still discussing the mystery thief's furry feet. Pemba trailed after them, listening in silence. Burnmaster suggested to Gulbenkian that he keep an eye on the kids for the rest of the night and then turn to leave. But before he walked away, he stared for several long moments at the 3 parallel gashes in the mattress and wondered if toenails, even long ones, could cut through thick fabric like that. After the 14-year-olds had dragged their mattresses into Gulbenkian's room and the hubbub in the corridor had faded away, Pemba dialed Zaw's number on the sat phone. He was much relieved to hear his Yeti friend's voice. They talked about the fact that Flattop didn't see Zaw's face and maybe saw his furry feet but wasn't sure, before moving on to the more pressing issue. "So how are we going to stop them going into the mountains?" whispered Pemba. Zaw, who was sitting on a rocky hillside rubbing his sore shoulder, sighed dejectedly. "I think we're out of ideas," he muttered. "Not quite," said Pemba. "There's still the phone call from the friendly park ranger." Zaw groaned. "Meaning me, right? Or Abby," said Pemba, "but obviously it can't be me because Burnmaster will recognize my voice." "Great, I'll let Abby do it," Zaw said. "It's only fair we share the load." "Suits me," Pemba replied, "and there's less chance she'll mess it up." "Hey, it's not my fault the silver-haired oaf was awake," Zaw snapped. "I was kidding," Pemba said. Zaw sighed. "So when's a good time?" "Better make it early," Pemba explained. "I have a feeling Burnmaster intends to leave soon after sunrise." Zaw muttered something about needing a good night's sleep in a proper bed and then hung up. Abby was lying on the hillside next to him, already fast asleep. The following morning, as Burnmaster, Gulbenkian and the 14-year-olds were repacking their equipment in the foyer, the hotel manager answered a call on the old, wall-mounted telephone and then ushered Burnmaster over. The South African spoke on the phone for a short time, and when he came back, Gull asked, "What was that about?" "Some joker claiming to be a park ranger," Burnmaster replied, "told me I shouldn't go climbing at this time of year." Sounded like she knew the Langtang area pretty well. Isabelle noted that Burnmaster was continuing to pack his gear. "So what did you say?" she asked. "I thanked her for the call, then I hung up," he said. He glanced up and shrugged. "I don't know who she was, not a park ranger, that's for sure. I've never heard of park rangers making courtesy calls to climbers. Anyway, I already know that it's not a good time of year to go climbing." "So she wasn't telling me anything I don't already know." Isabelle smiled.
That is the end of this chapter. To listen to the next chapter on YouTube or to purchase the digital ebook from Amazon, see the links in the description.